Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 433, and today's date is August 5th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Propaganda Warning, Terror Groups Could Be Building an Ebola Dirty Bomb. Now, before I get started, I just want to say one thing here. On the X22Report.com site, I placed the Ebola outbreak map on the site. If you go to resources, there will be a drop down, and right on top it says map of the Ebola outbreak. Just click on that. It's a Google map. It's dynamic. They'll be adding more information there. You can click on the pins or the triangles, the warning triangles, and it will give you information on all different sections. And we can watch this map, how the Ebola virus spreads across Africa, into Europe, and into America. I also have the immigration map on there if you haven't seen that. It's in the same resource menu. It's right below the map of the Ebola outbreak, and that tracks all the illegals coming into the country. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that the economy is completely falling apart. We see Europe, they're in a recession/depression. Countries are having a very tough time. But here in America, what they like to do is they like to play and manipulate the numbers. They manipulate GDP, inflation, unemployment, and many other numbers to make you believe that we are in some type of recovery. But what we're seeing right now is that more companies are closing than are opening up. More companies are going bankrupt and out of business than those who are completely trying to create a new one. And this has been going on, and it is picking up during this year as more and more companies are laying off people, going out of business and closing, and that trend is actually picking up here in the United States. Now, I see on the corporate media, they are really playing up real estate, saying that, oh, look, everything looks great. It's a great time to buy a house. Go out there, you can get 100% financing, interest rates are pretty good, and you can really pick up a nice house. And they're saying that, prices are starting to slow a little bit, and what we're seeing is that this is a very good time. Well, what we're really seeing is that prices are slowing right now. CoreLogic says prices rose 7.5% in June compared with 12 months earlier. That's a solid gain, but less than the 8.3%. If we just look in June, it only gained about 1% or so, and if we go back a year ago in February, the gain was 11.9%, so the trend is now down. Now, if you look in many of the areas of the country, what we're seeing is prices are actually coming down and falling in the Northeast in certain sections, in the South, and in the West, and this is going to have a domino effect. Kay Schiller was out there saying, yes, prices are starting to level off and they're starting to dip. We are coming out of the summer. It is now August, and they're making a very big push for people to go in and purchase houses. And we can see right now that this is going to start to fall apart, because what we know from everything leading up to this point is that they've been laying off thousands of people from their mortgage departments, Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo. This started back in August of 2013 because they realized Americans just didn't have the funds to purchase houses. They didn't have the credit to purchase houses, and they didn't need all these people in the mortgage departments. We've also been seeing a lot of mortgage companies closing down and continually laying off people. We see mortgage applications, refinance applications plunging by 66%. They're still declining every week throughout the summer. We have seen a decline of mortgage applications. So we can see from what's going on that we are imploding when it comes to real estate. And as we move out of the summer, this is going to increase, and they know it. They realize what's happening here. And this is why they're trying to gin up war all across the globe. They are provoking everyone everywhere. Now, it looks like more Russian oligarchs are pretty much getting away from the dollar. Now, we understand in a report I did, Russian oligarchs were moving from Visa and MasterCard, going to the Chinese credit card. And now what we're seeing is they're dumping the dollar and moving towards the Hong Kong dollar. Now, we have to remember the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the dollar, but in a report I did a while back, I talked about the Hong Kong dollar being depegged, and if this happens, the Hong Kong dollar will increase in value by 30%. Actually, the dollar is keeping it down. And if they peg this to something like the yuan or renminbi, they could see an increase of the Hong Kong dollar. And we can see right now the Russian oligarchs are maneuvering and protecting themselves. And they're saying, listen, we can go to the Hong Kong dollar because it's pegged to the dollar, so it's pretty much the same. But if that peg is removed, we're going to see an increase of the Hong Kong dollar. And we can see how this is all playing out right now. They know exactly what's going on. They understand what is happening. And they realize in the future, the Hong Kong dollar will no longer be pegged to the dollar. And they realize the dollar is doomed. And they're protecting themselves from the Western sanctions. Now, in my past reports, I talked about, a couple of states where their premiums are rising. And now we're seeing that, yes, in 27 states, the premiums are rising on an average of 7.5%. So the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable. We're seeing prices continually rise, and it's getting more and more difficult for people to get the health insurance. We're seeing rise in prices in New York, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Arizona, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Vermont, Indiana. And we're seeing many, many states reporting this, where the prices of these health insurance policies are continually increasing. And they're not going to stop, because this whole thing was designed where everybody was going to be in. They really wanted the youth in there to pay for the older population. And guess what? The youth are not buying the health insurance. The middle class, having a tough time making ends meet, are saying, you know what, we can do without the health insurance right now. The older population who's sick, who have a lot of medical issues, they're the ones who are purchasing it, and the system is losing money at this point, and this is why they're raising the premiums on all these policies. And you have to remember, they designed this and they thought that everyone would be in, and those people who decided not to be in, they'd be penalized and they'd be forced back into the system. But guess what? It is not working whatsoever, because when you penalize someone who doesn't make that much money, it's not that much of a penalty. Now, we're seeing out of a Pew report that 75% of the illegals from Mexico are repeat offenders, and 97% of them are teenagers. 3 in 4 illegal immigrants, juveniles from Mexico, who are apprehended at the border are repeat offenders. They continually come back into the country. According to a Pew Research Center report, which is based on analysis of Mexican government data obtained from the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there have been over 11,000 illegal immigrant juveniles from Mexico who have been apprehended from October of last year to May 31st. The report found that 76% of them were caught for at least the second time, and a whopping 15% of the juveniles had been apprehended at least 6 times before trying to cross the border. About 97% of illegal immigrant juveniles apprehended from Mexico this fiscal year were teenagers, compared with 80% from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. So we can see right now they're continually coming in. The border agents are not there. They're not protecting the border, and we're having more and more of these teenagers come into the United States. Now, of course, we see this Ebola outbreak going on all over the world, and you would think the United States government would say, hey, you know what? We have a problem. We're going to have to lock down the borders right now and protect the United States because of this major outbreak that's occurring. But you don't see any of this. You don't even see them saying, oh, you know what? Yeah, they're leaving it wide open. So we have drug cartels coming in, supposedly terrorists coming in, criminal entities coming in, people from Africa who are carrying the Ebola virus coming in, and they want this all coming in. This is setting the stage for something big. Now, I understand that I talk about DHS and terror lists and things like that, and what we're seeing out in Michigan is that there's a small community of about 3,900 people, and that's their population of the community, and they're receiving armored tanks there. I think they received 2 of them, and it seems like the Michigan police chief wants 30 non-certified officers added to the force. Now, we're seeing this happen in other areas where they're bringing in outside police officers and adding them to the force. Now, the people in that community are saying, well, why are we doing this? We're a population of 3,900. These people do not know our families. They don't join in any of the extracurricular activities that the kids do. The kids aren't going to school. Why are we having these outsiders come into our town? And why are we seeing this all across America? Well, this is done on purpose, because then there's no connection with these police officers to the community, because when the collapse comes, it will be much, much easier for these people to come down hard on these people. And Tony Craseriol said, they're not from around here, a biochemist who moved to the area seeking a peaceful life. He said, these reserve officers are not our friends. They're not our neighbors. Their kids don't play sports with my kids. Who are they, and why do we need them? Secondly, why do we need these two Humvees, these armored personnel carriers here in this tiny, tiny town? And we're seeing that many towns across the country are receiving these armored vehicles, and we're seeing many police officers being infiltrated by other officers coming into their town that have nothing to do with their town. And again, DHS has infiltrated all these towns. They're setting them up, and right now DHS is dormant. You don't see them really active doing much of pretty much anything, because their real mission is to control the population of the United States when the collapse comes, when riots break out. They're there to protect the government officials. It is their personal military police force, and this is exactly what this is being used for. So you haven't even seen the side of DHS, and when they're activated, you will not even recognize them whatsoever. Now, it looks like there is another leak that's happening right now. We know Snowden was one leak, and now there is a new leak. And we talk about terrorist lists quite a bit. And out of the 680,000 people caught up in the terrorist screening database, it has been broken down of who is actually on this. And this is coming from this new leaker. And guess what? We were actually right. All that information that we were discussing about who's on this list, well, it looks like about 280,000 of the people that are on this list have no affiliation to terrorist groups whatsoever. They're everyday people here in the United States. They're watching your moves. They're looking at who you talk to if you're suspicious and you're being placed on the list. And we can see right now, those people who have al-Qaeda affiliates are about 73,000, and those are the people in Iraq. Al-Qaeda by itself, 50,000. Taliban, 62,000. And then it's broken up into much smaller numbers. So what we can see right now is that the majority of people on this list are people and everyday citizens right here. And it's becoming very, very scary, because we're getting into Minority Report territory here. You know that movie that tried to predict crime, so they put them on a list and they watched them, and if they came out that they were going to do something before they did it, they were picked up. Well, it seems like that's happening right now. And of course, they're collecting all your information. They're going to get iris scans, photos from the DMV, fingerprints, facial recognition, and you'll be placed on that list. They'll keep a record of you, and when the time comes, before you do anything, they will pick you up and take you away, because you are on this list. They're protecting themselves, and anyone that's a threat, they will be coming after you. Now, Hina Shamsi, director of the American Civil Liberties Union National Security Project, saying that the fact that this information can be shared with agencies from the CIA to the NYPD, which are not known for protecting civil liberties, brings us closer to an invasive and rights-violating government surveillance society at home and abroad. And we should all be very, very nervous about this, because they will be, and believe me, this is not the only list that's out there. I'm sure, and I've mentioned this many times before, there are other lists that are out there, and they're keeping records, and they're, of course, spying on your emails, your phone calls, creating social profiles of every single person, and correlating all the data. And we can see this is really ramping up now, and they're really trying to keep an eye on every single person. And this is why all the private Western Central Bank countries are all doing it at this point. Now, Obama is going to pretty much announced that he's going to be spending about $14 billion in U.S. corporate investments in Africa. President Barack Obama will announce on Tuesday that U.S. businesses have committed to investing about $14 billion in construction, clean energy, banking, and information technology in Africa. So do you really think that's what they're doing down there? Absolutely not. These investments are part of pretty much militarizing Africa. Wherever China is, because China is doing that right now. They're pumping in billions of U.S. dollars into the infrastructure of Africa, and right now the United States knows they need to get in there. They need to contain China, and there was a special report that was from a think tank that showed that, yes, the United States is maneuvering and trying to contain China in this region, and right now U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington is part of a growing American effort to increase its military presence and counter al-Qaeda-linked militants in Africa. With the presence of al-Qaeda in Africa, there is too much at stake for the U.S. to ignore the continent, and Washington is expanding its footprint in Africa. And like we said, they're using terrorism and al-Qaeda in Africa to maneuver more and more troops down into this area. Many Africans are pretty much concerned that U.S. is coming in, but the U.S. is convincing them that it's in their best interest because we have to stop this terrorism. And we can see right now with Boko Haram, al-Shabaab, and everything else that's going down, and al-Qaeda, of course, going down in Africa, we can see this has all been created to get the troops into this area. Because right now China has a huge footprint in Africa. Most of the nations down there are working with China. Kenya is a clearinghouse for the yuan and renminbi, and we can see right now that most of the African countries are removing the dollar from reserves and ramping up and adding yuan and renminbi to their reserves. And guess what? The United States is not going to let this happen. They're going to maneuver, and wherever China is, that's where the U.S. is. Now, it looks like there is a U.S. Army general that was killed in Kabul, and he was a two-star U.S. general in Afghanistan, which appears to be the highest-ranked U.S. officer killed in action since the Vietnam War. The attack took place in a relative safety of the officers' academy at Camp Kwargag, Kabul, when a gunman wearing an Afghan army uniform apparently turned his weapon against Americans and other Afghans. In addition to the U.S. general's death, a German brigadier general was injured, with along about 15 other ISAF personnel. Now, again, we have to remember what's going on in Afghanistan. Right now, John Kerry's out there trying to manipulate the elections for the next president. They want a president where they can convince this person to sign the bilateral security agreement so the U.S. troops can stay in Afghanistan. There is going to be no removal of the troops in Afghanistan. If they get this signed, the bilateral security agreement, troops will be staying in Afghanistan. They will not be removed because they're not going to give up the strategic location. They're not going to give up the poppy fields, which they use to create opium, and they sell the opium around the world for their covert missions. There's also a huge deposit of lithium and copper, and guess what? China is there helping the Afghan people. And now they're trying to bring the terror notch up, and we can see already that a U.S. Army official general was killed there, and they're going to use this to try to push the bilateral security agreement. Again, they don't care who they kill, what's going on, as long as they get their way. And when I say they, I'm talking about the U.S. government and central bankers. Now, it looks like from all the sanctions, Poland is also going to get hit. Warsaw may lose at least $700 million in 2014 if Russia expands the list of food products banned from being imported into the country, Poland's Deputy Prime Minister and Economy Minister said. Polish exports to Russia will fall by 20%, and Polish exports to Ukraine will decrease by 40% this year. So we can see right now, all of this is going to have a boomerang effect on all the European nations. It will have a boomerang effect in the U.S. But again, they don't care at this point because they realize the dollar is collapsing. They're coming towards the end game. They realize they need to start this event. They need to provoke, and they need to get this war started any way they possibly can. Now, Putin is out there, and he's saying he's preparing some retaliatory sanctions, and he's saying that we're going to maneuver and do things. Of course, we already know that he put pressure on U.S. companies like Microsoft, IBM, Intel, AMD, and many other companies. And all this is coming about because the U.S., European nations are continually placing sanctions on Russia, saying that they need to stop what they're doing. But what they're doing is absolutely nothing. We had international inspectors checking to see if Russia was supplying Ukraine with arms, and they said absolutely not. We had the OSCE on the border saying, no, Russia does not have any type of buildup on the border at this time. We had an embassy crew drive up and down the border, and guess what? They saw nothing. We had U.S., Germany, France, Ukraine use the Open Sky Treaty to fly over Russia, and there is no U.S. troop buildup. We had NATO produce satellite images, and of course, those were debunked because they were showing Russian buildup, but the photos they were using were from last year when they were having drills. So all of this is being completely fake. It's phony, and they're continuing this propaganda in the news to make everyone believe that Russia's ready to attack. And you can see as soon as the MH17, that false flag event occurred, they went right out there and accused Russia, and then they had to back off because they were caught in a false flag event. And we can see this is still happening. It's ongoing, and they're going to continue. They'll be continually using other false flag events, and they will not stop. This is going to escalate as time goes on. Now, Russia is saying, you know what? You're going to place sanctions on us. We're not going to fire any type of weapons at you. We're not going to build our Russian troops along the border. We'll just say, guess what? We're going to restrict our fly zone, and all commercial airliner jets will now have to go around Siberia and take a longer route. It will cost billions in fuel. People have to travel an hour and a half longer, and this will not help the economies and the people in Europe and America. And we can see they're going to retaliate with sanctions or other methods. The United States then is going to place more sanctions on Russia, and this will continually to build. And of course, Putin is a chess player. He's very patient, he's calm, and he's not going out and building up troops. Now, we understand there is a drill going on in Russia, and yesterday I said, well, as soon as this drill is going to be going on, we're going to see in the corporate media and in the White House saying that, oh my God, Russia's building up their troops, they're ready to invade. And guess what? Jen Psaki is already out there. She's the U.S. State Department spokeswoman, and she is out there saying, yes, Russia is building up their troops right on the border. It looks like they're ready to attack, and they're ready to move in. I mean, this is just unbelievable. And Russia is out there, well, and they're talking about when Jen Psaki said this, that they're right on the border and they're ready to attack. They're saying maybe she should check her geographical facts before raising concerns over the Russian Air Force exercises, because they said if you take a look at the map and you see where our drills are being taken place, they are in the Ashuluk military range, and this is hundreds of miles away from the Russian-Ukrainian border. So we are not on the border whatsoever. We are inland, and if she takes a look at the geographical map and educates herself, she would see this instead of pushing out propaganda, letting everyone know that Russia is mounting troops on the border. And I knew this was going to happen, and here it is right today, just right on schedule, actually, that they're out there saying, yes, Russia's ready to invade. Now, Ukraine is having a huge amount of troubles. We understand their economy is collapsing. The troops are deserting. They're saying, you know what, we're done here. We're not getting food. We're not getting supplies. We're not getting ammo. We don't want to do this fighting. There are riots going on inside the country. People do not want to fight. They're saying, you know what, go fight your own war. We shouldn't be part of this. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a rise up of the people pushing against the puppet government trying to remove them. Because you have to remember, people can't afford anything. Their currency is being devalued. They have no gas for the winter. Their economy is crashing. They're in a war. There's a draft going on. How is this better for people? It isn't. And what we're seeing right now is that Ukrainian troops have reached the eastern cities of Donetsk and Lugansk, and they're ready to do an all-out assault. This is why we see the missile launchers coming in. They are ready to move this forward, and they're just going to bomb everything. They don't care if it's civilians. They don't care if it's hospitals. They don't care if it's schools, because the central bankers don't care about the people. They could care less about them. All they care about is take control of the country, rape the country of the natural resources, put them into debt, and that is it, and then make the people do what they want them to do. And that's all they care about. But we're seeing a lot of the Ukrainian troopers defecting, 438 Ukrainian troops, and even more is being reported, up to 700, and saying, we're out, we want Russian asylum, we don't want to be a part of this. And it looks like this is continuing and continually happening as time goes on. Now, it looks like NATO's top commander has begun entertaining the idea of a regional headquarters specifically focusing on Article 5 violations, which requires members to come to the aid of another member if it is attacked. Right now, I think the nations agree that we have the force structure we need. We just need to adapt it. This is coming from Breedlove. The mission changes to resolute support. It is time for the existing force structure to begin to train for more Article 5 kinds of defense missions. The alliance's military wing was looking into a broad set of measures to make NATO more responsive to threats from Russia. Breedlove said, it may be that we may need to put a headquarters in north, in the center, and in the south. These will be looked at. But the most important thing is we will all look into measures to make NATO more responsive to crises such as the ones in Crimea, in Ukraine. NATO sources are not ruling out Turkey's possibility of hosting one of the regional headquarters focusing on Article 5. Poland is lobbying actively to be the front runner for a NATO headquarters, and it might even be that Ukraine might be some type of NATO headquarters if they join NATO. Right now it's on a non-state status, but who knows in the future. They wanted to put Ukraine and have them join NATO, but they lost the port from the referendum that happened in Crimea. They're in a battle in the southeastern region, so right now they are holding off in joining NATO. Now, out in Israel, it looks like there is a ceasefire. A lot of the troops are moving out of the area. They demolished the infrastructure of Gaza at this point. And we can see right now that Spain is halting arms exports to Israel over what's happening in Gaza. The Spanish government has decided to temporarily halt all arms and military exports to Israel in the wake of the Tel Aviv's offensive in Gaza Strip. Spain provides Israel with missile parts, fuses, hand grenades, mortar parts, electro-optical equipment, and fire control systems. Spain is the second country to stop arms sales to Israel in the past 24 hours, as the British government also said on Monday that it is reviewing all arms export licenses to Israel to assure that the arms are being put to appropriate use. The UN Human Rights Council recently passed a resolution calling for an independent probe into Israel's war crimes in Gaza. Now, it looks like there's some propaganda out there where it seems like they're saying that some factions in Gaza is asking the Islamic State if they'd like to join the battle against Israel, and the Islamic State pretty much declined the invite to the Gaza war. Now, of course, they're going to decline this, and this seems like this is type of a propaganda trick here. You have to remember, the Islamic State, they have been created by Israel, the United States, England, and other Arab nations and other private Western Central countries. It is a creation of all these countries to put chaos into the Middle East, and it seems right now they're showing you like, oh look, Gaza has terrorism. They're asking the Islamic State to come on in, but Hamas is out there saying no, we never asked, and we do not want ISIL inside of Gaza. Now, it looks like there are reports, and they're saying that the Islamic State is trying to move their troops into Lebanon. Now, we're going to see this happen into every single country, where there are going to be reports saying that Islamic State is now maneuvering into Lebanon, into Yemen, into Libya, and they want this because the tribes are rising up, so they have to make it look like the Islamic State is also there, and they're causing all these problems. Because once the Islamic State is deemed a terrorist group, or not a terrorist group, but a real army, the United States then can use that pretext to bring in the forces into this area with, of course, some type of special event. Now, it looks like Egypt and Algeria are considering military operations in Libya. Now, we have to remember, the government is falling in Libya. The tribes are rising up, and we already see now that Egypt and Algeria are making the move to help out the puppet regime inside Libya, and they're protecting their borders and making sure that this doesn't spread. And we realize right now that the Libyan government has been calling for international help, and it seems like Egypt and Algeria are starting to maneuver into this area because they're very worried about this spreading all over the place. Now, it seems like there has been information coming out now of who exactly is al-Baghdadi. Now, of course, he's the new poster child of terrorism. He's taken over for bin Laden. And, of course, what we're finding out is that the head of the Islamic State is actually Elliot Shimon, a Mossad-trained operative. Simon Elliot, or Elliot Shimon, a.k.a. al-Baghdadi, was born of two Jewish parents and is a Mossad agent. The so-called Elliot was recruited by the Israeli Mossad and was trained in espionage, psychological warfare against Arab and Islamic societies. This information was attributed to Edward Snowden and published by newspapers and other websites. The head of the Islamic State, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, has cooperated with the U.S. Secret Service, British, and Israel to create an organization capable of attracting terrorist extremists from around the world. Now, we understood the Islamic State was part of the United States, Israel, UK, because we can see them pretty much siphoning off the oil from Syria, bringing it into Iraq, selling it on the black market, and the United States says absolutely nothing. But again, we use that example, and then we look at what was happening in Libya, where the tribes smuggled off oil from the oil fields, put it onto a tanker. The tanker left port, and guess what? Lickety-split. The SEAL team was on top of that ship, bringing it back before you can blink an eye. Here, it doesn't matter. We have a ship sitting off the coast of Texas with oil, and the United States is saying, listen, we can buy oil from anywhere inside Iraq. But you have to remember, if you go back in time and you look at May of 2014, you look at March of 2014, you look at February 2014, Obama was out there saying, no, all oil sales must go through Baghdad, and now it doesn't matter. So we can see right now, yes, the Islamic State was created. They're doing their job. They're creating chaos. They're creating a caliphate, maneuvering the Sunnis, the Shiites, and the Kurds into their location. The United States is beefing up Iraqi military, and they're placing those soldiers with those sects in the country, and it's already starting. So we can see all of this was created, and even the leader is an agent of Mossad, and this was all created to create an event to bring on war. And we can see this is being pushed very, very hard right now. Now, we understand that New York City, just the other day, had a major drill. It was a surprise drill about Ebola, about all the agencies coming together and doing this drill about a patient or an Ebola breakout. Now, it's very odd how this drill happened, and then like the next day, there was an Ebola patient that was brought right into New York. Every time we see some type of drill or surprise drill, it seems like always something happens on that day or the next day, and we see this happening right now. Now, it looks like CDC has removed the phrase contaminated air from the new Ebola webpage, and they replaced it with aerosol generated during certain medical procedures. Now, it's very interesting that they would change this. What is the reason for changing it? We don't know, but it seems like it's a very odd thing to start changing at this point. Now, it looks like British Airlines suspended flights to Sierra Leone. They suspended flights to Liberia, and because of the Ebola breakout. Now, they've done this until August 31st, which is a strange date that they've done this to, because we know that Congress now is on vacation. They're recessing, and they've made this date go to the end of August. So this is very odd that they have done this, and they should have said we're going to suspend the flights until we can get control of this outbreak, but they didn't. They picked a very specific date, and this is what they're doing right now. Now, it seems like some of the patients were given vaccines, and just it's a miracle they have a vaccine ready to go with all this. But what happens when they say that everyone has to be vaccinated, where they make it mandatory for all Americans? And if a full-blown Ebola epidemic is raging by this time, the demand will be overwhelming, and people will want to run to get vaccinated. Just like when they say, "Oh, go get vaccinated for the flu," you see lines out the door here for people trying to get the flu vaccine, because they play it up in the news that flu is spreading very quickly, everyone's getting it, and you have to go get the flu vaccine. Now, I got the flu vaccine once, a very long time ago. Now, I'm 48 right now. I got it one time. The one time I got it, that's the year I got the flu. I have never ever had the flu since that, or before that time period. So that's very, very odd. And what we're seeing right now is how this would come about. They will want every living person around them in their community to get vaccinated, because people will come out, they'll be scared, and they'll say, if you're not vaccinated, we don't want you near our children, we don't want you near our family, and this could spread complete chaos around the country. Now, can the states and the government ask for mandatory vaccination? Well, according to a paper by Gerard P. Cole and Kathleen S. Swendeman, many states already have laws that allow for mandatory vaccinations during a public health emergency. Many states also have laws providing for mandatory vaccinations during a public health emergency or outbreak of a communicable disease. Generally, the power to order such actions rests with the governor of the state or with a state health officer. If a person refuses to be vaccinated, he or she may be quarantined during the public health emergency. But what about on a national level? It has never been done before, but that doesn't mean that President Obama can't, take his pen and paper and create an executive order or something to say, yes, that everyone needs to be vaccinated. Barack Obama seems to believe that the power of the presidency is virtually endless, and we have already seen him sign a series of very frightening executive orders. The company that makes this experimental drug that they're using on these two people is called MAP, Biopharmaceutical Inc., stands to make a giant pile of money because of this, if this goes live and they can use this vaccine. And there's another company called Mirror Pharmaceuticals. And the question I have is, I'm wondering how many government officials own these stocks already. So if anyone's out there that can get this information, if any of the major players already own these stocks of MAP Biopharmaceuticals or Mirror Pharmaceuticals, I'm going to look myself. I'm just wondering how many people are in on this, how many shares they have, and what it looks like right now. Because if they're looking to make millions of billions of dollars off of this, these people definitely are in on it. And if they own a lot of these stocks, the central bankers, government officials, we know that for sure that this thing was completely made up. Now, it's coming out all over the corporate media that experts fear an Ebola dirty bomb. Experts fear terror groups are building a dirty bomb containing the Ebola virus. Britain, the Sun newspaper reported this, saying reports feel if such devastating attack had been raised by Dr. Peter Walsh, a biological anthropologist from the Cambridge University. He told the Sun there was a serious risk is that a group manages to harness the virus as a powder, then explodes it in a bomb in a highly populated public area. It could cause a large number of horrific deaths and make this spread very quickly. Terror campaign, does the Islamists extremist group Boko Haram want to explode an Ebola bomb in the UK? Well, the Sun is saying, yeah, they do. They want to do this. Really? Boko Haram wants to use the Ebola virus and explode it inside the UK. It's just unbelievable, the propaganda that's coming out of here. While all samples of the Ebola virus is in a handful of advanced research facilities around the tightly guarded, it would be possible that the terrorist group could get samples of the infected material direct from the West Africa home of the feared Boko Haram Islamic extremist group. So you're seeing how they're trying to use Boko Haram right now and really push that this terrorist group is international, and all of a sudden they want to spread Ebola around and blow up these dirty Ebola bombs in different countries. This is absolutely ridiculous. If anything, it's going to come from the inside to cause mass hysteria, martial law, and to get us into Africa, where they actually want to go. The United States wants to get there. The UK wants to get there. The private West central bankers want to get into Africa. They've been trying to use Boko Haram with the kidnapped girls. It didn't work. They're saying Boko Haram now is exploding, using bombs in colleges, and now they're taking it to the next level. And like I said, we're in this time period where Congress is pretty much on vacation. We saw this back in 2013 when the false flag event occurred in Syria, where they blamed Assad using chemical weapons. So right now we can see things are really starting to be laid out where something is definitely going to occur. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.